All right, guys, welcome back to our final chapter review. I decided to do chapter 30 and 31 together just because they're relatively short and they're also really intertwined, like thematically. And now that we are at the end of the book, congrats, y'all, you did it. As you can tell by my adorable little chapter reminder picture, there was no information on killing mockingbirds, which is a really fun, like a little display, just because I like cats. And I thought it would be funny because a lot of people, that's what they assume is it's a moral lesson on over the death of a mockingbird, when in actuality, the mockingbird serves as more of a metaphorical purpose of like, some people argue that it's Tom Robinson who symbolizes the mockingbird because his like death, it's like he did nothing but like contribute good things in the world and they took him down. Or you could, some people even argue that it's George Yule, or Ewell. I never say that last name right, because he goes around and all he's doing is singing. But at the same time, I'm not sure about that argument just because I don't think anybody really liked the kind of songs that he was singing, that so they weren't exactly bringing enjoyment the same way that Tom Robinson's were. All right, so chapter 30. Hectic wants George Yule's death declared an accident. So he's like talking about how he wants it declared an accidental death, and they're talking about like how they know that Tom Robinson, like why George Yule did this and how Tom Robinson had died for nothing, and they don't think that George Yule should as well. So there's also the part here where you have to remember that Heck knows that it was Arthur Radley or Boo Radley that stabbed George Yule, but Atticus thinks that it's Jem, and he doesn't want to come across like he's trying to like protect his son by declaring it an accidental death and being a part of this. And it's Hecate that says, let the dead bury the dead, which is sort of like it's a really good metaphor. It's like, what's the thing I'm trying to think of? Like the blind leading the blind, or like an eye for an eye. There's this idea of this sense of equality within justice. It's a lot like, here, let me scoot back a little bit just so I can show you guys the visual. I know I'm a big visual learner. Here we go. On chapter 26, how we talked about what is justice. Here we have justice's scales right here. So here we are, and it's like the whole point is that it's supposed to be balanced. So the idea of like letting the dead bury the dead is that you're bringing balance to it, that it's like then all of a sudden now it's like by declaring this death an accident, you're also giving way for Tom Robinson's death to have meaning. Like the sort of like justice of it, that like George Yule would have never gone after you if it weren't for the death of Tom Robinson. And now that Tom Robinson and George Yule are both dead, like let that bring the balance to the scales sort of situation, like bring balance here and like let the dead bury the dead. So I thought it was like really good that like Harper Lee included that like thematically overall, because there's this overall sense of like what is justice, like justice is supposed to be blind, justice is supposed to be balanced. So here's this like the people are bringing their own justice into it, and their like small town justice, one might call it, is it's like they're declaring it what they need to declare it in order to like let bygones be bygones and get like sweep everything under the rug and forget about it. So then we bring into chapter 31, and first they go upstairs, of course, and wish Jem good night. And then Scout walks Arthur, Mr. Arthur, or Boo Radley, home. And once he's inside, she's kind of looking around, and she likes to imagine his point of view. And it comes back to this quote about putting yourself in someone else's shoes, like that is in the very like first two chapters. I want to say it's in the second chapter, not the first chapter. Like when the whole thing happens with Walter Cunningham, and she's really rude to him because he's poor. So she's like, I don't want to like be with him. He's poor, like I don't want him at my like lunch. Like, why is he pouring syrup all over his food? And it's this idea of like, you don't want to embarrass him, like put yourself in his shoes. So now here we are, this full, like everything's coming back together for like the very last chapter. Atticus was right. One time he said, you never really know a man until you stand in his shoes and walk around in them. Just standing on the Radley porch was enough. So like that one time is in like those first few chapters with Walter Cunningham. And then the story, like overall at the very end of the chapter, ends with Scout falling asleep to her father reading a story. So I feel like overall it really connects to like the nostalgia that Harper Lee was shooting for of this like simpler times that were also like not so simple, because it's like it was written in the 60s but it takes place in the 30s, and like given her age it's supposed to be like her childhood. So there's like this sweet ending of Scout falling asleep to her father reading a story. You know, it's very soothing, it's very all is well in the world, where it's like there's the sense of like there was an injustice of killing the Mockingbird that was Tom Robinson, but it's been balanced by George Yule getting his own justice in the end of getting the fate that he had tried to inflict on Scout. So it's like overall there's like this, everything's right, this like scales of justice are balanced, and in the end Scout is still just a kid and she's falling asleep to her father reading a story, where it's like to her this is just her childhood, but it's like for us as readers we can overall see like the thematic growth of her as a character, as a narrator, and us as readers overall. All right guys, we did it. That's the end of the book. Thanks so much for watching and reading the novel. And there is also a chapter overview. We've been doing chapter overviews, so I have put together a nice little like overall like book overview of like what we've been talking about within the chapters, as well as things that reference back into the packet that you guys received when we were still like in class. So the video will go over a bunch of different things, and I'll see you there.